Hey James, how you doing today? How you doing
Yeah,
today?
I'm very good. I'm very good, and I'm very excited to talk to you because I know we've had a few conversations in the background, and the thing that's connected us is this real passion for the climate and passion for the environment. And I know you're somebody who has transitioned your career into focusing very much around this, and you've got a big corporate sales career. So I'm really keen to chat to you about all that and learn about all about that journey.
Great.
So why don't we start there? Question for you to kick us off. Help us understand what happened. How did you go from that corporate world into what you're doing now, this scale up climate tech adventure that you've been on for the last few years?
Wow, big question. And diving straight into the deep
Giving
end,
you a
I think.
hard one to start,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I guess to answer that, it's probably worth just taking a very small step backwards in that I would, if one took a kind of look at my career as a whole, I would define it as a career of pivots, purposeful pivots, and jumping into climate is a good example of the latest pivot that I did a couple of years ago. But I mention it like that because I think it's really important. If you're going to work in whatever industry, in whatever type of organization, that you shouldn't be frightened to pivot. You shouldn't be frightened to do different things. I remember very early on in my career, in fact, it might have even been when I was at university, someone saying, yeah, over your 30, 40 years of career, you should be looking to have 3 different careers. And if you really want to get a lot out of your kind of work time, then look to pivot. And so climate is my latest pivot, and it kind of came about when I was in a successful scale up. I joined a technology company called Duco. They'd just done their Series B fundraise back in 2018, and I joined shortly thereafter. I'm, as you know, James, I'm a kind of professional sales, marketing, product guy. So I joined to run initially the European sales team, but very quickly took over the global teams and marketing and partnerships as well. We successfully scaled that. We both quintupled the revenue over 3 years, and had done a successful fundraise. And as part of that fundraise, the new owners wanted to move the commercial function from London, where it was, to the East Coast. And so it gave me an opportunity to recruit my successor, gave me an opportunity to think about what I wanted to do next, either with that organization or whether I wanted to pursue something else. And while I was exploring that, a couple of kind of things kind of came to light. The first off, one of the things we really struggled with the company was how did we articulate the mission? And its founding kind of original mission was a technology one. Here's a really interesting problem. We were dealing with complex data sets within banks. That's a really interesting technical problem to solve. We've got a different way of dealing with it. And it was a bunch of really intelligent PhD engineers that were going about solving that. But very quickly, of course, the company had scaled to a size where that mission wasn't as meaningful anymore, particularly if you weren't an engineer. And we often struggled with how do we articulate this? And the best we really could come up with was to make banks richer. And that didn't feel very fulfilling anymore to me. Yeah, I enjoyed the journey. Christian, the guy that set it up and is still involved in the company, super interesting guy to work with. And there was a lot of super brilliant people there. But I felt it was kind of time to do something that had a different mission, and a mission that resonated a lot more. And so I was thinking through this thought process, going, well, what has meaning to me? And it brought me back actually to my days at university. I'm both proud, but also interested to note that I was at university in the late 80s, early 90s. And it was at that time climate was reaching the public consciousness. It's when we had a realization about the hole in the ozone layer. You had the Rio Earth Summit in '91. You had the kind of Kyoto summit as well, not so long thereafter. And I got very passionate about it, got very involved with it. And it became something part of my personal life, but never part of my career. I never thought that's something I can make a career out of. So that sort of reawakened in me going, oh, that's really interesting. The crisis has only got worse. The need to do something has only got more important. Added to which, there was a very logical thing that I observed as well, which was more venture capital money going into climate startups.
Yeah.
So we'd gone through the kind of clean tech phase of solar, wind, EVs, and the like, and we were now really entering into a kind of climate tech version 2. It was entering into more the areas that I am more familiar with, data, software, and the like. So there was a logical reason. I could see the economy growing, I could see the ecosystem developing, and I could see a potential place for me. And so those sort of twin things really came together, going, okay, I want to be more mission driven. I want to see my next 5 to 10 years of my career being something that is purposeful, potentially giving back, looking to solve a real kind of almost existential problem. But secondly, something's really exciting. You know, some of these businesses are super interesting and at a very early stage of their journey.
So how do you select? How do you go about selecting the right mission? Because I think, you know, look at there's a whole bunch of different scale ups, isn't there, in climate? Everybody's like clambering for we're on this mission, we're on that mission. How have you gone about actually breaking that down? Because there's a lot of noise, isn't there? There's a lot of things to process there.
There is, and I mean the whole nature of solving the climate crisis requires 1,000 to 1,000,000 lots of different things to happen all at once. There is no one answer. There's, as I say, we need 1 million businesses that are going to scale really, really well, and in different markets in different ways. And you're right. It was another problem when I kind of left Duco. I sort of sat there going, okay, where is my place? And I guess I brought a typical salesperson's mindset to this, which is, who do I know? Who don't I know? Who do I need to know? And what do I need to know to be able to answer this question? And I also kind of brought with it, and I'm going to mention this because I think this is a really important attribute to anybody in the world of work, whether you're in corporate or in startups or scale-ups. I felt I brought an open mind to it. So rather than bringing a preconceived, I want to work in this part of the ecosystem in this particular job, I brought an open mind to the point of, I don't know enough about this, so I'm just going to swim in it a bit. I'm just going to go out there and I'm going to meet lots of different people, partly to build my network, but also partly just to go and chat to interesting people and see what's going on, what are the interesting problems, how people go about solving it, and also with a mind to go, and where do I see my role in this ecosystem? You know, what can I bring? You know, what am I capable of doing? But also what interests me. And so really, I would say for the first 6 months of my change, and of course I was fortunate enough that I was able to take 6 months off. I know not everybody is in that situation, but I think the base kind of principles of what I'm describing are the same. For the first 6 months, I went on both an educational and a networking journey. You know, every other night almost, I felt like I was off to a climate event, a couple of times a day, meeting people just for coffee, for no reason other than just to hear their story, hear their journey. And
was that planned, that almost sabbatical? Was that, did you think, I need to invest this time in you talked about there, but, you know, finding your place and understanding your you know where you were in this big climate world? Was that planned, or was that just kind of happened?
It was planned to a certain degree, in the sense that the situation enabled me to take my time, and therefore I made a conscious decision to go, let's not rush into this. If I want to do something, I'm going to do something that is right and is super important. So let's go and explore. And you know, I'm very conscious that not everybody has that freedom. But that said, I mean, I think you know, if you're a particularly stable job, you know, the one where there's no need or imperative to move, then you can still use your time to educate and network. I mean, just last night I was at an event, super interesting event, organized by a company called Terra, both a kind of educational networking organization. They're doing a series of events this week. They've got a climate week going on. And again, great group of people. There were people like myself who've been through some of the Terra programs and talk knowledge about it, and are now in a kind of climate ecosystem. And then there were others who are doing other things and are exploring. So that is but one. In fact, there's another event tonight, which is the Climate Connection event, which is, again, they're on every month. Again, super interesting group of people, usually 3 presentations there as well. So yeah, it doesn't have to be, I've got to take 3 to 6 months out. I've got to use, daytime. There's lots going on in the evenings. You need to kind of obviously sacrifice that time, but there's lots of opportunity to get out there and meet people.
And what did you learn from, you took that time, your preconception at the start of that 6 months versus what happened at the end? What was the kind of difference between what you thought might happen and the reality of what played out?
Yeah, a great question again. The 2 kind of key takeaways, and in some respects, when I talk to people about their potential transition into climate specifically, but one could take similar lessons, is the climate ecosystem's only just developing. It's a classic flat pyramid. There are lots of great organizations out there, but they're all relatively quite small. If I was using it in kind of funding parlance, they're kind of pre-seed, seed, a few at Series A. There are very few at Series B. Good classic product market fit are now kind of scaling. There's some good ones out there, but there aren't many. And so what you're mostly looking at in terms of the today climate ecosystem is a lot of startups. The characteristic of a startup, if they're hiring people beyond the founding team, is they need experienced people to do a specific job. And therefore my other, and this was kind of certainly my focus as well when I sort of completed the 6 months. My other conclusion was, if you're going to make a career move, and you're particularly going to make a career move into a startup ecosystem, do it on the basis of what you're good at. I always say, when you make a career move, don't make 2 moves at the same time. Don't take 2 risks. So don't go for a completely different industry and a completely different job that you've never done before, because you open yourself up potentially for failure. You might even struggle to get the job in the first place, because what are you leaning on in terms of skills and capabilities? But secondly, I think you open yourself up potentially for failure. So I think if you're coming from a more traditional industry and you're kind of jumping into something around climate, there's your industry change. So play to your strengths. Play to, what do you know are my superpowers? What do you know that I'm really good at? So if you're a good product manager today, go and be a good product manager in a startup business within climate. Bring that expertise, bring that capability, because these businesses are crying out for that type of expertise, not just product management, but good finance expertise, good sales expertise, right across the board. And they need people to hit the ground running. There's limited time and capacity to spend a year learning. If you're going to learn anything, you're going to kind of learn the market, learn the ecosystem, learn what problems they're trying to solve and how they're going to solve it. So and to a certain degree, that was the same kind of realization for myself, going, well, what do I know? What am I good at? Sales, leadership, marketing, product. But even within that, if there was a kind of common threads of what I'd done through my career, it was often companies that are data related, data services, or solving data challenges, very often software, SaaS nowadays, with a heavy kind of emphasis on financial services. And so, quelle surprise, the part of the ecosystem I found myself in is heavy on financial services, heavy on data, software delivered, and so and running sales and marketing teams. Hardly a surprise really, but it kind of, I think, reinforces the point I'm making. I ended up playing to my own strengths and landing in an area in a market I knew little about, but learned really, really quickly while using my own skills.
Did you find that pivot, as you've described it, when you were starting to engage these different potential employers, how receptive were they to what potentially you could bring? Did you find that you needed to go talk to quite a lot? And because I know from working in these businesses, I understand what you're saying. They do often have quite a key criteria that they're looking for people to bring. It can sometimes be really, really specific. So how was that experience for you?
Really tough to begin with. Yeah. I mean, my heart goes to anybody that, and not even just within climate, anybody that's looking to pivot career and do something different, then getting that first step on the ladder as such is really tough. And you're right, because not just the recruiters, but also the recruiting organizations, they have a very specific kind of type of person in mind. And if you don't quite fit that, then how do you get through that first door? And particularly on very competitive roles, where they're getting hundreds of CVs through the door, what's the standout around that? And I found, two really old-fashioned things worked for me. The first is, don't rely on kind of blind applying. Just go out there and meet people. Most of the roles that I have ended up doing over the last 2 years are not through any advertisement. It's because I've met somebody. I've met somebody else, and it's opened up a conversation. And timing often is everything on this. I mean, the current role I'm doing at Abatable, the chief commercial officer. When I reached out to Valerio, who's the CEO, it just so happened that week him and the board had decided they needed a new chief commercial officer, and I knew him previously anyway, and I was just checking in. So, I got a bit lucky there. But hey, as Arnold Palmer says, the more I practice, the luckier I get, and the more I network, the luckier I get. So I think good old-fashioned getting out there, networking, chatting to people, in order to make yourself visible about your levels of interest, type of person you are, I think is super important. The other is again, open your mind to different types of solution. So don't think about just full-time job. One of the other avenues, and in fact it's very active for me at the moment, I've pursued is interim. And okay, it doesn't suit everybody. It might not suit everybody's life circumstances. But the really interesting thing on a kind of startup scale-up ecosystem is often they want a certain type of skill set very, very quickly. They're not sure if they need it full-time. It's a great foot in the door. And what I found noticeably, I mean, almost night and day, that in 2022, when I was exploring, where could I fit and what sort of roles I was doing, versus 2024, because I'd had 3 or 4 different organizations that I'd worked with, some of them quite well known, suddenly the doors are opening much more readily, and people are much more interested. Suddenly I'm bringing not just functional skills, sales and marketing, I'm bringing now climate and market understanding and network of that. So I definitely encourage, if get out there, meet people, but also open the thought to other different entry points to organizations. So there are different ways to start doing some work, to start building that experience of the market.
And how do you, I mean, I think if anybody looks at your LinkedIn profile, it'll make sense without us going into it in a huge amount of detail. They'll look at your earlier career, very, very stable, and let's call it a typical sales leader journey that you've gone down there, and then you've gone into this more scale-up world, and it looks really exciting because it's taking you to all these different projects and all these different things. So I guess there's 2 questions that certainly come to my mind about that, which is, how do you handle it mentally, being part, you obviously don't have that maybe financial security, or that these are short-term projects. So how do you firstly mentally handle that? Secondly, how do you handle it the other side from, again, maybe a mental perspective? You're part of a mission, and you talked earlier about connecting to the right mission, but you might only be on the rocket ship for a short period, and you take it so far, and then it's like, hey Douglas, thanks, but off you go. So how do you balance those 2 things?
Yeah, and I'm not sure I necessarily have the right answer to that, but I can give some guide and indicators at how I'm coping with it. I mean, the first thing I'd definitely say is, to anybody that is working in a large corporate that wants to jump into startup, scale-up world, definitely do it eyes wide open. It is a different culture, and I have seen it firsthand and indirectly. Many people who've not coped well on the journey. I remember a former CEO of mine, on the first sort of PE company I jumped into, and it might have been my first day, first week, he said, what you'll find around here is when you want something to happen in a corporate, you push a button and something happens. He says, here, when you push that button, not only does nothing happen, when you lift up the button, you realize it's not actually wired to anything.
Yeah.
And so you definitely, if you're kind of making that transition, need to transition up with a mindset to go, the world is going to be different. You're going to find yourself, whatever level you're at doing a multitude of things, from really basic wiring buttons to make things happen to more complex strategies. So be really open to that, and also open to be scrappy. So the difference in my mind between startup and scale up is startup is trying to find that product market fit. It should be open to any opportunity. You shouldn't be overly too focused on what you're about. You should be prepared to pivot the product and look for the greatest area of opportunity, and somewhat experiment without moving too far away from your core mission.
Mm-hmm.
Scale up is where you're trying to do that on a regular basis. So that's where you are laying the groundwork for structured, repeatable, predictable processes. But to transition, you need to kind of take on both. And again, I think this is sometimes what a lot of people, when they come from big companies into smaller companies, don't quite get, is that scrappiness.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just got to be scrappy. You just got to do it. Going, look, I know it probably doesn't make sense, but we need it to make payroll, or to extend our runway, or whatever we might need to do. We've got to survive. You've got to survive first before you have an opportunity to scale up. So I think the first thing is, my first advice is, really, if you're making your transition from big to small, have that mindset. Be aware of what you're letting yourself in for, because it is not for everybody. I know it might seem attractive. I know you can listen to these other podcasts and they talk about the great journey, and it is very, very rewarding. You can see the direct relationships of your activities to the output, but it isn't for everybody. The second part of the question, which you talked about, is, as you say, that sort of interim nature. And again, I don't think it's for everybody. It's not even just about, as you say, finding yourself working on something for a period of time and then not. It's also about the economics of it. You're not getting a regular salary, so you've got to be in a position where that works for you, and also be confident in yourself that when a job is ending, that you've got sufficient network that you could find another piece of work. But I think you hit on a really valid point, though. The real, I think, driver of being in a kind of startup or scale up is that you're really mission driven and you feel like you're really contributing to the mission. And I think that I have to say that is the hardest mental adjustment when you're only there for a short period of time, because you don't feel quite as connected to the mission as you know that everybody else is around you. I mean, I personally, I get sucked in quite quickly to the mission and drink the Kool-Aid very, very quickly and get on it. But it is a hard wrench when you're then, okay, you're not part of it anymore. And I'm not sure I've got any good advice on any coping mechanisms for it.
What are you looking for?
What's that? Sorry, James?
What are you looking for on that mission bit? What when you obviously you all got pretty good at spotting a good mission and a mission where you think not sure. So maybe there's a way of answering that, of asking that, which is, what are the warning signs? What are the things that you think, hang on a minute, that's too ambitious, or that's doesn't align, or does that make sense?
I think so. Well, let me have a go at answering. I mean, the things I look for. I mean, one of the most important things to me, mission to one side, I found is working with great people. I've worked in a variety of organizations across 30 years. Some people have been amazing, some people less so. And I also think, certainly for me now, where I am in my career, I don't feel I want to spend time with people that I don't really want to work with. And so that definitely is the kind of first important factor. And it's interesting. I think the world we find ourselves in now with video conferencing, whether that's kind of Teams, Zooms, I think is super brilliant to get to meet people, but I don't think is a replacement to actually physically meet people. I think you can really only tell how well you would like someone or spend time with them by really being with them. You get much better, I think, kind of conversation. You pick up on better conversation cues. So, go and meet them. Go and meet them in the working environment in which they're in, and get a sense of who they are as people. So that often is the first thing. The second thing is, as you say, is how believable is that mission? and how believable are they in terms of delivering on it. Now, it should be big enough to feel like it's something that you can throw yourself into for a period of time, but it shouldn't be impossible. A company setting out to solely solve climate change on its own, you go, well, hang on a minute, this is just too big. You've got it wrong somewhere, or you're just not focused enough. But if someone's kind of trying to solve a very particular type of engineering problem, which looks super interesting for 3 people, it's not going to scale. It's not going to have runway. But even within that, as I say, you've got to kind of look as if you've got to flex sometimes. There are many stories of organizations that set out on one thing and then realize that what they built actually solving a slightly different problem and a bigger problem. So, be back to what I was saying, be open-minded about it. But yeah, definitely don't get too caught up in the early days on the, as I say, drinking the Kool-Aid, going, this looks super brilliant and the world is amazing. And don't get caught up with kind of warning signs about how much money they've raised or, it's a good indicator. Investors are nobody's fools. They know what they're doing. And it's a comfort indicator. If they've got runway based on that, on the amount of money, then the business is going to be around for a period of time. But it's a poor proxy, I would say, on the likelihood of that business being successful. And again, back to eyes wide open, 9 out of 10 businesses, startups, don't make it to Series A fundraise. Right. They fail. And they don't always fail because of bad management. There are a variety of reasons they fail. I mean, part of my journey, I set up my own business in 2020, late 2022. As part of my finding my role within climate, a good friend of mine came to me, pitched me an idea, which I bought into, and we had a crack at trying to build the business, and it failed. And I'm not embarrassed by that, because we took a lot from it. It was a great journey to go on. I always felt that it would be good to start my own business, and we learned why we failed. And again, another kind of great lesson that we could bring to it, which put simply was great business idea, too early to commercialize it.
Okay. So what was the business in a nutshell? Was this climate related?
Yeah. It was looking at 18% of climate emissions come from property. So there's a big job of work to do around the world, particularly with a property that was built more than 10, 15 years ago, to improve its efficiency. So there's a lot of retrofitting, particularly in the developed economies, that need to go on. So whatever energy you're putting into the property, you are not losing it through the windows of the walls, to put it simply. And one of the dynamics you're starting to emerge is where banks are creating green loans, green mortgages, whether this was residential or commercial. One of the things that's missing, though, is an accurate measure of what are the emissions for property.
Right.
And that's what we set to solve, is can we provide the most accurate measure of property, so it's sufficient both from a reporting point of view. So the banks have very few scope 1, scope 2, direct emissions. They have big scope 3 emissions, indirect, through their loan books. And so they are wanting to and required to kind of bring that down, but they can only do that by, of the money that they're lending is being used to help improve the decarbonisation of the economy. And so the banks are very willing to lend the money. At the moment, there isn't a market for the landlords to take the money on and retrofit. So there's little in the way of regulatory push at the moment, and there's little in the way of economic benefit. And again, that was sort of the learning journey we went on. And really, we only discovered that by getting out there and talking to people, out there and understanding, what pressures are they feeling for their business, how important is this to them. The banks could definitely see the value, new loan offers, but they're only going to unlock that if people are kind of taking on money. And so again, back to the point to your question, I think exploring that a little bit, not just how good does this feel, this company, about it wanting to solve climate change, but how does this problem feel, and is it a big problem, and is it one that people care about enough that they're going to spend money themselves on wanting it solved? All businesses have got problems. Your CEO, C-suite to-do list is longer than they can solve. You need a top 3, top 5 problem to really drive economic success of your own business.
That brings you around really nicely. Actually, one of the questions that came to my mind was asking you, business development when you're going into a scale up and it's got maybe quite a niche product versus business development when you've maybe got a brand, you're in a corporate company, you've already got loads of existing customers. It's what are the differences? How are you actually getting in front of people? What's your approach? You land in one of these scale ups. What are some of the first things you do to actually start getting those cogs moving?
Yeah, great. Yeah, another great question. You're right. I mean, when you're in a smallish business, nobody knows you.
Yeah.
You might be known within your kind of local ecosystem, but in terms of the people that you want to reach out to, nobody knows you. I would say there's three key things you need to absolutely nail if you're going to start scaling, and you need to be. And one can argue, oh well, you need to be opportunity led. Yes, you need a bit of that, as I was indicating earlier. But if you're going to scale, you need to nail these three things and be super focused on them. The first is, what is your target market? Who are you going after? There are, if you're B2B, which is my specialism, there are millions of businesses in the world, and even if you're constraining it to the UK economy, there's still about 1 million businesses out there that you can go after. You do not have the resources to go after 1 million businesses. As much as you might think your marketing is good, it's got good reach. I'm telling you now, you will not have the resources to go after that. So be super focused on who your target market is. And then within that, and slightly connected to that is, and what is the problem you're trying to solve for these organizations? And you get a two-way indicator. And I give you a kind of real for example of a live debate we're having in Abatable, which is, if you look at the nature of the market that they're operating in, put simply around corporates, you've got people who've been in the market for a long period of time and are used to buying carbon credits. And you've got people that are coming into the market for the first time. Last year and this year is the first time. So do we go after repeat buyers? Do we go after first-time buyers? And there are pros and cons with them. And it's a live debate that's going on within the organization. I mean, the reality is we'll do a bit of both, but we'll need to put emphasis on one versus the other. And so really understanding that problem statement and then being able to articulate it in your pitch. I find too many times, and in particular in startups, the pitch is all about them and their product, and not about the customer and the problem. And if it's super neat and it's using some super neat technology, it might have a level of attractiveness that might capture the imagination of the customer, but potentially you're getting the customer to have to do all of the work. They're trying to figure out, okay, how do I use this product, and why is it good for me? You need to turn the pitch upside down. It needs to be all about the customer, all about the problem to solve, why they need to solve it now, what's the compelling event that's going to motivate them to make this a top 3, top 5 problem. And then it's about how you solve it, which then when you start to bring in things like why you versus that organization over there. And then the last thing is then making sure you're lining people up against that market, whether that's sales, whether that's marketing, whether that's product. Have a clear understanding of how you're going to line all that up against those organizations. And it might be that, your affordability at the moment is, I can only afford 2 salespeople. That's fine. But going back to the target market, be conscious of what it is. Be conscious to ignore part of the market, because only 2 people are only going to be able to cover so many accounts. Better they go deep with a few rather than trying to spread themselves too thin with too many, and really align then the marketing function with that to be supportive and generate whatever leads they need to generate, and make sure that collateral against the problem statement, the value proposition is all lining up. So to me, they're always the things I kind of, in between kind of startup and scale up, I look to nail absolutely now. If you want to be doing repeatable, scalable sales, you need to have a clear pitch on something that matters to an organization that it matters to, and you need to be deploying people that are well trained in that pitch with the right tool sets, and you need to be reaching out with your marketing proposition aligned to that. And just to dwell on that, I mean, I think you may have mentioned it yourself. A lot of people talk about brand when they talk about marketing. When it comes to scale ups and startups, I guess I'm brand negative.
The anti-brand.
Yeah, I think you can spend too much time on brand. For me, the only thing that really matters with the brand is what do you want to be known for?
Yeah.
And therefore, actually, it comes from really the pitch then. You've got your pitch clear, and everything that flows from that, whether it's your website, whether it's any speaker engagements or those sort of things, you'll get to be known for that. And that's what your brand identity will become. I do think it's important to have strong values in an organization, but when there's only 30 of you, and even at that stage of growing, those values will come natural. You'll particularly as the co-founders, you'll hire the right sort of type of people. They'll be right for the organization. There'll be a natural behavior, and you'll call out people if they're not aligning to those values, and you can do it. Maybe when you get to 150, 200 people, you need to think a little bit harder about how we better reinforce those behaviors, how, particularly when the co-founder's not directly involved in any recruitment anymore, how we make sure we're bringing in the right people. But I think at that early stage, don't obsess about brand. Don't worry about it. Obsess about pitch, obsess about your proposition, making sure that it's solving a real problem, that it's creating a compelling event to do something about it, and that it's unique on a difference that matters, but it's unique compared to others in the market.
Cool. Bit of a 101 question for you on that. So what you said there all makes total sense, totally resonates, and I agree. How are you actually initially taking that pitch to market? So I've spoken to tons of people in scale-ups. There's lots of different theories around this. Some sellers will say, oh, we'll hire a lead gen company and they'll take that message for us, and then I'll turn up at the meeting and away we go. You've got people that rely heavily. You've talked about marketing, maybe that's email campaigns, maybe it's events. We know there's a whole bunch of different ways. So how are you actually initially getting that message out there to what might already be quite a noisy market?
Yeah, I think at a startup stage, unless you have intimacy and you really know your buyers, I think you have to try all of the above, and you have to experiment and put it on a short leash. So experiment really quickly and make some decisions on it really quickly, and going, how well is this working for me? Yeah. As a professional marketer in a startup, I don't think you have the luxury like you have in a corporate, where you can run 3-6 month campaigns and take your time over it, and you're working in a slower market where you're probably more looking for product displacement on established buying patterns, rather than new product into buying something new. So I do think you need to experiment, but what you need to have in the back of your mind is back to, what is my ideal customer profile, back to target market, who are the buyer personas within that, and where are they? How do they go about buying? I also think there's no replacement for having a small cohort in the group just being out there and speaking. Speaking engagements, particularly in a market like climate. So I share an observation that a former head of sales shared with me. He worked with me back in Duco, so we were both sort of selling to banks, and then we worked together in a climate business. And he said it's really interesting, the contrast between the two. In the climate business, people love picking up the phone and will love to meet you, because it's a fascinating area. It's very topical. Every day it's in the newspapers. People want to know and people want to learn more. And there's a big kind of requirement on education. Turning that into opportunity is really hard work. The reverse was true at Duco. Trying to get people on the phone, and they're going, oh yeah, I don't want to hear. The moment you did, or the moment you got a meeting, you knew you had an opportunity. So the kind of meeting to opportunity conversion rates are high. So I think it's super important with particularly something like climate, and even a kind of subpart, that your key speakers are out there talking at events, getting to be known. Their personality, again, back to kind of the brand, their personality kind of comes through then in the brand, that they go, in Abatable's case, where I'm at the moment, they go, oh yeah, Valerio, the CEO of Abatable. Yeah, we know him. We know what he can talk about. He's super subject expert in this particular area, along with Maria. And so I think joining panels, getting out there, being part of that, and then the follow-up effect that marketing should be having, the halo effect on social media and other places, I think is is really, really important, and companies, all companies should be doing more of that. They should be out speaking. But I agree, and I'm not sure I have a magic answer. It's a noisy market out there. There are a lot of people trying to vie for a lot of other people's attention, and so I do think you have to try a lot of things with that whole view of who is my buying audience, where are they, and timing is everything, of course. You know, when at what point is this a problem they want to solve? Because if you're too late, as in they've just gone and solved it, then they're not interested to talk to you. And similarly, if you're too early, it's like, no, I'm thinking about something else at the moment. So you've got to get that timing piece just right, which to begin with is just a bit of a random guess.
It's a little bit like it's almost like people are interested in the subject matter, but maybe they've not got the budget yet. Maybe it's on our agenda, but to your point, it's item 5, not item number 1. So it's a bit of a timing thing.
Yeah, when we talk often about the language of opportunities and sales, and we're trying to figure out who the competition is, one of the categories I often ask for is no decision. No decision sometimes is a bigger competitor than any other competitor out there, because, as you say, the time is just not right. They just don't believe it's something they need to solve now. And we're in an interesting period with climate. There's an emerging regulatory push, but it's not as big as it's going to be. I mean, we fast forward to 2030, I think there's going to be a lot more regulation. You've seen stuff emerging out of California, out of Europe, and more of that's going to come. But as a corporate, there's no compelling need other than if it's important to your own end buyers. You know, there's a lot of movement in consumer goods now about being carbon neutral or having products that got a lower carbon footprint.
It's interesting, and it probably sets me up nicely for one last question, because I know we're nearly out of time. But I've noticed this in the last 12 months. So talking broadly across SaaS businesses and technology investments and scale ups, we've not had the amount of VC money coming in, and that's prevented growth. And I have seen a change in what was maybe quite an exciting climate tech world, where businesses were very forward thinking. We've got this many staff, and next year we're going to have that many, and we're going here, and we're going to go for this investment. And it's felt that even though it's such an important, amazing subject matter, that it's almost fallen victim to finance. Basically, it's just not got the money coming into it. So the question for you that I've got a long way around of asking is to do with what's the future here? What's actually going to happen, do you think, in climate? We've got this long runway here to 2030. That's not that far away. It feels like it might be, but maybe at the same time, we're not getting, certainly in the immediate term, we're not maybe getting the same investment that was coming into the space. So just what's your view on where it's actually headed?
Wow, that's a big question. I certainly think come 2030, we're going to hit a holy crap moment. In
a good way.
No, I think in a negative way. I think there's, don't get me wrong, I don't want to be all kind of doomsday about this. The human race is doomed. There are a lot of good things going on. I mean, if you look at even just here in the UK, the deployment of renewables over the last 20 years, and how much of our electricity is actually coming from renewables on a consistent basis, it's massive. It's night and day over the last 20 years. It's hardly, I mean, there's no coal power stations going on at the moment. So, and as much as people may kind of decry the current government, actually the UK is ahead in its own climate commitments that it signed up to in the Paris Agreement. Though it's done all the easy stuff, it's got all the hard stuff to do now, unfortunately. So there's a lot of great stuff going on. I do think, though, these next 5 years are going to be rather telling. And I do think everybody, consumer public, governments, corporates, will face a bit of a holy crap moment in 2030. And there'll be a bit of a scramble going on. We need to do an awful lot more. We need to accelerate a lot of what we're doing. But you're right, the reality on the ground is there just isn't the level of finance going into climate companies that we really need to solve this particular problem. I mean, the good news is the degree of financing on kind of climate tech proportionally to how many companies out there is higher than it is in kind of traditional SaaS. I think we saw, didn't we, in 2022, a lot of VCs in particular kind of really pulling back money the market, really focusing on existing portfolio. It was more about making sure that the existing portfolio is scaling. I also noticed a change in language from back in 2018, 2019, when I used to sort of, speak with our investor. It was more, if I gave you more money, can you scale quicker? It was all about pace of scaling. Whereas now the language of how quick can you get to be profitable, how quick can you get to break even, has come back into the equation. Even early day kind of seed funding, Series A, it's still got back to the language of kind of break even profitability. But to your point, I mean, I think the areas where we're going to see some really exciting stuff. I do think tech-based removals is really exciting, and we're seeing some good money going in. Microsoft, Stripe, Meta are all pouring great money into tech-based removals. I'm not one for technology is going to solve this problem full stop. I do think there's lots of behavioural change that needs to come in. I do think, even though I think they're slow to adopt, I do think there's going to be some really interesting stuff in the maritime industry that's going to come in. The degree to which goods are moved around the world is huge. We may even find actually that gets bigger as we displace goods off aircraft and bring them onto boats. But I think there's some super interesting stuff. I saw one the other day where they're using a form of carbon capture from the boat, so its emissions, through burning kind of dirty diesel. They're capturing some of the carbon from that, and then they're putting it into mineralized rock. So they're capturing the carbon in the rock, and then when the boat arrives at its port of destination, that rock then becomes aggregate to sell. So it's like it becomes another product with its own,
that's cool.
value on it, which I thought was super interesting. I mean, how that scales, not quite sure yet, but it's solutions like that, I think that I think could start to come about and start to increase. I also think in the area that I'm in, which is in carbon credits, and particularly nature-based carbon credits, I think that market is on a tipping point to really 10x and scale. The need to value nature, the need to kind of restore some of the forestry that's been cut down, the need also to move finance from kind of global north to global south and bring money into these kind of indigenous communities is great. And this isn't just about solving climate alone. This is also about social justice. This is about rebalancing the economies of the world as well. So I think we could see a lot of both regulatory and finance pressure, as also nature pressure as well in these particular areas. So I think carbon markets, I've long believed, as much as I know it gets a lot of negative press, I long believe carbon markets have a lot of good about them in terms of redirecting finance, creating finance into local communities, and valuing nature, that we've got more we can do in those particular spaces. So they're just a couple of examples, but I do think, I mean, as I said, there are a million solutions out there, and I do think other great things will emerge, and it isn't all going to be about just tech. Some of it is going to be about how do we change consumption behavior as individuals and corporations. I came across a business the other day who are creating green steel, but not because they've got any different type of process. They actually go in and redesign the steel making process so it becomes more efficient. So it's classic business engineering. But they're able to sort of put a green spin on it, understandably, because they're, in virtue of doing that, they're lowering the emissions. But actually what it is an efficiency drive for the steel making companies. And I think we'll see more of that, as the economy starts to decarbonize. We'll actually see businesses thinking differently about what their value is and how they kind of create that value.
There are so many amazing ideas out there, aren't there? There's so many different things, So I know we're about to run out of time. I've got one last little thing for you. We've not spoken about it at all. So we've spoken about Abatable, which is really cool. So just tell us about Horizon 34 that you're involved with, because that's really cool as well.
Yeah. So
sorry, 37.
That's right. So Katie, who set up Horizon 37 a few years ago, a great friend of mine, she identified that there's a really important kind of trigger moment from startup to scale up. And a lot of co-founders don't have the skills and the experience to be able to be successful on that journey, particularly if it's the first time you've set up a business, and particularly if you're more engineering technology bias and you haven't worked more traditionally in a business environment. And so she identified this kind of problem area and has designed over the last few years a series of products, either half-day engagements, assessments, or other kind of longer-term programs, where what we're really doing is supporting, preparing, and skilling both founders, but also the team they need to bring in, because they need to move from founder-led to kind of exco-led, to be fully aligned, to be fully prepped, and to be fully equipped for that scale-up journey. And it's going great guns. I mean, there's a great market out there. I'm specifically kind of trying to bring some of those products that Katie's designed to the climate world, to climate businesses, because again, I kind of recognize that, you know, there's a lot of climate startups out there, and a lot of the founders are solving a highly technical problem, and they've got that technology understanding, but they now need to think about how they scale that and some of the business dynamics and behaviors and bringing in the right people. Yeah, really excited about it. Really excited about how that can again contribute to that acceleration of certain climate businesses.
It's really important, really needed, isn't it? Because to your point, you know, typically founders are, you know, scientists or engineers or technically minded, and you can't do everything. You can't be a brilliant business mind and do everything all at once. So that having the support out there is really valuable.
Yeah, and hiring right as well. You know, that trust factor. It's hard to let go of your baby, you know, but you have to. You cannot do everything like you did in the early days. You've got to rely on other individuals. So hiring right is super important in that stage. So these are all the sort of support structures that we put in place for founders.
And that's a whole other topic that we could certainly talk. I could talk to you for all day about this, Douglas. It's so fascinating.
I come back in a few weeks' time and delve into that one.
Well, I really need to say a big thank you, because that's flown by that time. I've learned a lot myself, and I'm sure lots of people will say the same. So big thank you for taking the time to chat.
You're welcome. Thanks, James, and great questions. And yeah, I'll see you again soon.
Speak soon.